Well, we're doing this because it is my 3-year anniversary on the show. 3 years ago, I hosted for the first time with Colin Rogero, and then a couple days after that, I think it was Ryan Grimm, and the rest is history. I would say it's gone by quickly, but I don't know if that's the case. A lot of things have happened in the world and at this show and in my own life since then. I think we have some clips we're gonna actually play. Oh, there's a great shot of the cake.
This one.
Did you do the frosting yourself, Jessica?
I didn't.
Did you bake this?
I had someone else do it.
In the Airbnb that you're staying in, right?
I would have baked it if I wasn't in an Airbnb. Trust me.
All right, let's get to the clip of me on my first day. So we want to start the show looking towards 2024. There's a new straw poll that shows Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is actually leading President Donald Trump. Now, this poll was conducted by the Western Conservative Summit, and it surveyed attendance of this week's 2021 Western Conservative Summit in Colorado, asking voters about their preferred candidate for the 2024 presidential race. I still wear that tie pretty regularly.
It's weird seeing past Robby talk about 2024. It's a message from past Robby to future Robby. Really amazing.
Here's my first radar. Let's watch. Here's a question. Why do politicians and members of the mainstream media automatically assume that every tragedy is actually a hate crime or a terrorist attack, even before all the facts come in? This weekend brought yet another example after a car ran over and killed a man at a pride parade in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The perpetrator was initially presumed to be an anti-gay zealot making a political statement, but it later turned out the driver was a participant in the parade. The tragedy now appears to have been an unfortunate accident. Fort Lauderdale Mayor Dean Trantalis didn't waste any time, though. On Twitter, he initially called the accident a terrorist attack against the LGBT community. It was deliberate, it was premeditated, and it was targeted against a specific person. Since none of those things are true, he has now reversed course and admitted he leapt to conclusions. And he wasn't the only one. LGBTQ people are literally being murdered at pride parades in Florida, tweeted Steve Silberman of Wired. Some who bought into the false idea that the attack was a hate crime also blamed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. They even succeeded at making #DeathSantis a trending topic on Twitter. And as you all probably know by now, basically my favorite subject to discuss, the thing I'm most passionate about, was, of course, COVID-19, an interest that has not wavered since the beginning of my tenure on the show. Take a look. An op-ed in the New York Times notes that the pandemic has actually revealed the weaknesses of the CDC and the agency's constant back and forth with mask mandates and social distancing. Dr. Fauci is also clapping back at his critics over the changing guidance on masks and the origin of COVID, saying, "That's the way science works. You work with the data you have at the time." Yeah, I mean, he keeps trying to say that he changed his mind, but he changed his mind because of new science. I say, but hasn't he partly admitted that he was telling people not to wear masks early on because he was afraid of them being hoarded, or that he was afraid there wasn't going to be enough, a supply for hospitals and that sort of thing? Dr. Fauci didn't create coronavirus. I don't want to go in any kind of conspiratorial direction with it.
No, he did admit
But he
that.
seems to have, okay, maybe we will go there. But he seems to have this attitude that he can't be criticized because you are criticizing science itself if you undermine any sort of credibility. And I think he's been wrong about some things. He's a public official. He's not immune from criticism because he's a scientist by trade. Wow.
Now we know officially that Fauci did create coronavirus.
Yeah, I know. Fact check.
He gave the money to EcoHealth Alliance. They gave it to the Wuhan Institutes of Virology, and now we know that for sure.
I spoke too soon.
Yeah.
So that was Ryan Grimm. That was Philip Wegman, who's been a frequent guest on the show, and Colin, who I first hosted with. I remember getting I got a call to audition for the show. So Crystal and Sagar left. I think around this time, or maybe a few weeks earlier, 3 years ago. I got called by Jimmy Finkelstein, who was the owner of The Hill at the time. His wife had seen me on Fox Business, and so I auditioned for the right of center chair. And then I did the show with Colin, who had been auditioned for the left of center chair, although I think Colin was not interested in doing it for like a long period of time. So we did a few. I had no idea what I was doing. I had been on Rising as a guest maybe once or twice, so I was familiar with Crystal and Sagar. I just kind of I did not understand the audience at all. I learned everything I knew about the show from the camera guy at the time, Steve. You remember Steve? He set me straight on the kind of people who watch and the things that they're interested in. And then I wasn't back for a few days. And I'm like, oh, maybe I did a bad job. That's probably going to be the end of it. And then they called me back to do it. I think maybe because Ryan Grimm was out of town or something. I can't quite recall. And I'm like, okay, I get to do it again. And by that time, this whole acquisition by Nexstar had just occurred. So so Jimmy had sold in between my first time doing it and my next time doing, Jimmy Finkelstein had sold The Hill to Nexstar, to our sibling company, News Nation. And it was and things weren't very different, but just this major thing had happened in between. And then it was me and Ryan Grimm and Kim Iverson for a while, and then all the other people came in the mix, including you, who made your first appearance at Ryan's invitation to talk about TikTok. Am I correct?
Yes, and you were the other host. It was my first ever TV interview. Yeah,
you were talking about TikTok. What was it?
Censoring me.
Censorship.
So you were nice to me, and I was like, Robbie seems fine.
Oh,
I like Robbie.
Now you know better. Now.
Yeah, now I know much better. Yeah. But I think, have you been the host longer than anyone ever has?
I'd have to look at it exactly. I think I might have been I'm not sure how long Crystal was doing, because Crystal was initially with Buck Sexton for, I think, the first year of Rising. I think Rising started in 2018 or so. So I've probably been doing it about as long as Crystal did it, or maybe longer at this point.
That's amazing. And you stuck it out through many different owners, many different hosts. I'm glad we still have you
here. I hold on for dear life. That's
Did you always know you wanted to be a newsman? Or a journalist, or an opinion commentator? I
mean, I started out as a writer. I still write at this magazine, Reason. I definitely do a lot less writing and a lot more talking on television than I ever imagined, particularly because I don't know that I'm particularly good at talking at television, but people keep giving me more and more duties related to discussing the news and opinionating. So somebody must enjoy watching this. Thank you, whoever that is, that they continue to write me checks to do it.
It's Fauci. He's just watching. He's your #1 fan.
Fauci, you think so? Maybe he's a glutton for punishment. Maybe he just loves watching me
you keep him
criticize
honest,
him over the years.
You have to do a better job of that.
We did have Fauci on one time. Yes. It was me and Batya Ungar Sargon was the co-host of the day, and we got to ask him I think it was one of the more probing interviews he'd ever done. Obviously, I don't have a super confrontational style when I do interviews, and neither does Batya, frankly. But we were able to ask him some tough questions, so that was a great interview. We've done a number of interviews with Rand Paul over the years, with some other major Republican and Democratic officials. We've had Ro Khanna on a bunch. I think we're going to have him on again this week. So
lots of exciting guests, but
it's been a fun time.
You're always here to interview them. It's always you.
And we're glad to have you all week.
Yes, I'm glad to be here all
as well.
Week. You always bring stories that I wouldn't know about otherwise, and I think, as someone who cares about working class Americans and everyday people, I think your perspective is one that a lot of them share. I think our show with me on the left, critical of the government and corporations from that perspective, and your perspective on the right as a libertarian, I think it represents a lot of what I hear from regular everyday people. So thank you for that. We don't have that a lot in media.
I've certainly learned a lot about working class people from hosting the show, from the feedback I get, from the viewers, from reading the comments, from emails I get. And you can tell the power of the audience. I mean, how many people are interested in the kind of topics we're covering. I'll go out in the world, I'll be traveling on vacation. I think I was in San Diego once. I was just staying at a random hotel, and I got on the elevator, and the people in the elevator were like, oh my God, we're huge fans of Rising. We get stopped on the street all the time.
You have to break your scooter.
People see me scooter. Yeah, they yell, there goes Robbie on the scooter, which makes sense in DC because it's a political news town. Yeah. But I love when I encounter people out in the wild who like the show because it is different than anything else on TV, on YouTube, because it's actually a debate show. And debate shows, it's a right-left, like we've already argued a bunch of times today about police brutality and other things. This just does not occur elsewhere in cable news at all. Even shows that describe themselves as debate shows usually emphasize, or they just steer the show towards things they agree on. I understand why they do it, because it's like hard to argue every day, and it's, especially because I like you, I enjoy talking to you.
And we're actually friends.
Right, and I don't, and like when I talk to my actual friends, I try not to argue with them. If they say something I think is really crazy that I disagree with.
And then my friends come and argue with your friends when we hang out.
Actually, we did have a group meetup, like socialists and libertarians, and they did end up all fighting. And I was over there being like, I want no part of this. Like, arguing is difficult. It's stressful.
I didn't even know it was happening. Robby and I were talking about something completely different.
We did start arguing about the minimum wage. It came, not us, but our mutual friends. But it's because people have an appetite to hear frank and honest discussions. And it is just not something that occurs. I mean, so many TV shows, so many news programs are the hosts just bringing on somebody who already agrees with them, and the host gives a speech, and then the guest just kind of reiterates using different words that exact speech. It's become more like that over time. Like I think about when I used to watch MSNBC. They would have on Republicans, and I remember watching like Rand Paul on Rachel Maddow's show and her arguing with him, and that happens on the right too. Now, it doesn't happen anymore. They rarely bring on, unless you're going to do like one of those infamous Tucker Carlson, brings on some woke liberal teenager and destroys them, which is kind of can be entertaining, but just doesn't happen that much anymore.
Well, whenever we debate, I've never felt like you have made it personal or have assumed my opinions are born of ignorance. It's always, have you thought about it this way? And sometimes I haven't. Sometimes I haven't considered, well, what if the government has too much power in that case and it leads to these bad things? And so
I've never thrown a pen at you yet, and I'm going to endeavor to keep it that way. That's my promise to you and to the viewers.
Thank you, Rob.
As we keep going at this. That does it for the show today. Thank you so much for watching Rising. Thanks for being there over the course of my tenure and into the future.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while you're on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Bye.
And please let us know if you like this different format of the show. We don't know if we're going to keep it. Again, we're just trying it out. It's the same content, just in one video instead of many, because we're always trying to better understand YouTube and its many mysteries. Let us know how you feel. Stay with us. See you tomorrow.